Greetings, traveler of the seas. Tonight, I'll be your compass on a journey through waters few have ever charted. What I'm about to share doesn't appear in Morgan's newspapers, nor in the Navy's records. It's a story the ocean kept safe, tucked away from the world's gaze. They speak of a name, Blackbeard, Marshall D. Teach, also known as Knight of the Sea. I see you've come this far with salt in your eyes and the wind still clinging to your coat, perhaps from distant shores or memories not easily forgotten. Are you tired, lost between dreams left unfinished and longings that still echo in your heart? Come, sit here with me by the fire. The flames are low and calm, almost whispering stories to those willing to listen. Let the warmth hold you, and the silence of the night cradle your thoughts. There's no rush here, no danger, just stories, not the kind you read in a hurry, but the kind you feel slowly, with your soul. Each word is a candle lit within, each silence a soft breath between stars. Let's sail to islands that only appear when we close our eyes, where the laughter of old pirates still lingers, and where secrets sleep quietly beneath the sea. All set? Take a deep breath, let go of the helm of reality, and let my voice carry you somewhere new. The journey begins now, and maybe, by the end of it, you'll discover something meaningful about yourself. The vastness of the night sky stretched above the Moby Dick, a canvas of infinite darkness punctuated by countless stars. While most of the crew slumbered below deck, Marshall D. Teach sat alone, his massive frame silhouetted against the moonlight. His eyes, usually alight with mischievous intensity, now reflected something deeper, a quietude rarely witnessed by those who knew him only as the boisterous shipmate with the peculiar laugh. The sea breathed beneath the ship, a gentle rise and fall like the chest of a sleeping giant. Teach ran his fingers through his beard, each strand holding memories of years spent waiting, watching, planning. Tonight was different. Tonight, the mask of joviality had slipped away, revealing the man beneath, contemplative, patient, and profoundly alone. The stars don't judge, he whispered to himself. They simply witness. Have you ever felt that way? That the universe neither condemns nor celebrates your choices, but merely observes as you chart your course? Teach understood this feeling intimately. His path was one he had chosen long ago, when dreams first took root in a heart too young to understand their weight. He reached for a cherry pie left over from dinner, taking a bite more from habit than hunger. The sweetness lingered on his tongue, a small comfort in a moment of vulnerability. How strange that even men who cast shadows as long as his still sought such simple pleasure. I wonder, he mused, if dreams are worth the price we pay for them. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Around him, the ship creaked and groaned, a reminder that even the mightiest vessels are at the mercy of invisible currents. Teach understood currents, both those of the sea and of destiny. He had learned to navigate them, to harness their power, while appearing to drift aimlessly. In these rare moments of solitude, doubt sometimes crept in like fog over still waters. Not doubt about his ambitions, those remained unshakable, but about the nature of fulfillment itself. What happens when you finally grasp what you've been reaching for all your life? Does the hand that achieves its desire find contentment, or merely the next thing to want? A shooting star streaked across the sky, a brief, brilliant moment that came and went in the blink of an eye. Teach followed its arc until it disappeared into the darkness. Aren't we all just like that? He thought, burning brightly as we fall, hoping to leave some trace of light behind. The night air carried the salt of the sea, filling his lungs with each breath. This was freedom, not the absence of chains, but the presence of possibility. The world sprawled before him, vast and waiting. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own masks to wear. But tonight, in this midnight hour, Marshall D. Teach allowed himself to simply be, not the pirate, not the schemer, just a man beneath an endless sky, cradled by the sea. And perhaps that's all any of us can hope for, moments of quiet truth between the storms of becoming. The first light of dawn found Teach already awake, his mind wandering through the corridors of memory. Had he always been this way? A dreamer of impossible dreams? The answer lay buried in his childhood, in dusty streets and harbor views that now seemed to belong to another life entirely. Young Marshall had been unremarkable in many ways, another child with empty pockets and a stomach that growled too often. But his eyes had always been different. They saw beyond the horizon when others saw only the boundary of their small world. They gleamed with something that made adults uncomfortable, a hunger too vast to be satisfied by ordinary means. The sea called to me before I knew its name, Teach murmured, watching the waves catch the morning light, like it knew me before I knew myself. Have you ever felt recognized by something that shouldn't know you at all? As if the very elements of the world had been waiting for your arrival. He remembered the first pirate ship he'd ever seen, its black flag dancing in the wind like a promise. The crew had seemed like gods to him then, free in ways he couldn't articulate but instinctively understood. That night, he'd dreamed of darkness, not frightening darkness, but the kind that holds all possibilities within it, the kind from which new stars are born. His fingers absently traced the scar on his face, a physical reminder of lessons learned through pain. Pain had been a teacher to Teach, perhaps his most consistent one. It had shown him that the world doesn't yield easily to desire. It demands payment, sacrifice, patience. The sky brightened gradually, chasing shadows from the deck. Soon the others would rise, and he would don the familiar persona they had come to expect. Jovial, somewhat lazy, seemingly content with his place. A masterful deception maintained over decades. Sometimes he wondered if that version of himself was entirely false, or if it contained fragments of truth, echoes of who he might have been in a simpler life. What if the masks we wear eventually become part of our skin? What if the lies we tell reshape us from within? Nearby, a seagull landed on the railing, regarding him with a detached curiosity. Teach broke off a piece of bread from his pocket and tossed it toward the bird. Such simple exchanges, food for companionship, however brief, reminded him of his humanity, something easily forgotten in the pursuit of legend. "We're all hungry for something," he told the seagull as it pecked at the offering. "The difference is knowing what will truly satisfy." And that was the seed planted in him so long ago. Not just ambition, but specific ambition. Not just power, but a particular kind of power. The world was full of strong men, but how many understood the nature of darkness itself? How many had the patience to court it, to learn its secrets, to become worthy of its gifts? As the ship began to stir with morning activity, Teach took one last moment of honesty with himself. The path ahead was long and would demand more from him than most would be willing to give. But then, most men's dreams were small enough to fit inside their lifetimes. His required something more, a willingness to be transformed, to become something the world had never seen before. And in that transformation, perhaps, lay the truest freedom of all. Time moves differently for those who wait with purpose. For 16 years, Teach had been a member of Whitebeard's crew, each day a deliberate step toward a horizon only he could see. 16 years of laughter that sometimes reached his eyes and sometimes didn't. 16 years of brotherhood that was both genuine and incomplete. The afternoon sun beat down on the deck as Teach helped with the day's chores, his massive strength making light work of tasks that would strain others. Nearby, Marco called out instructions, his perpetually half-lidded eyes missing nothing despite their lazy appearance. Teach respected Marco, perhaps more than any other member of the crew. There was wisdom in the First Division commander, and a loyalty Teach understood, even if he didn't share it. "Oi, Teach," called Thatch, approaching with his usual grin. "Still dreaming of finding that devil fruit of yours?" Teach's laugh boomed across the deck, that distinctive say ha 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 that had become his signature. "A man can dream, can't he? Maybe today's the day my luck changes." The exchange was light, familiar, a conversation they'd had many times before, yet beneath it lay currents unseen, like the dangerous undertows that could pull even strong swimmers to their doom. If Thatch only knew the weight those casual words carried. Have you ever held a truth so heavy that carrying it reshapes you? A secret that lives in your chest like another heartbeat? When night fell and his watch began, Teach leaned against the railing, listening to the sounds of celebration below deck. Some victory or another, it hardly mattered which. The crew found reasons to celebrate life, and he admired that about them. In another life, perhaps that would have been enough for him too. The stars above seemed particularly bright tonight, as if trying to tell him something. Teach had long believed in signs, in the language of the universe, that spoke to those patient enough to listen. Was tonight significant? The air felt charged somehow, pregnant with possibility. How much longer? He whispered to the night. A rare acknowledgement of his weariness. Waiting required a special kind of strength, not the explosive power of battle, but the enduring fortitude of restraint. Some days, that weight threatened to crush him. And what of loyalty? The word itself had become complicated for Teach. He did feel something for this crew, who had accepted him, who had shared meals and battles, and quiet nights like this one. Was it possible to both love and betray, to honor and deceive? The contradictions lived within him, neither canceling out the other. Perhaps that's the truest reflection of the human heart. Not pure good or evil, but a constellation of competing truths, each valid in its own light. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Teach followed its path until it disappeared. The old superstition came to mind, a wish upon a falling star. What would he wish for, if such things held power? Not for the waiting to end, that would come in its own time. Perhaps instead, for understanding, whenever his true nature was finally revealed. Not forgiveness, he would never ask for that, but for someone, somewhere, to look at the fullness of his choices and see more than just darkness. Is that what we all ultimately desire? Not to be judged good, but to be seen completely and still considered human? The ship rocked gently beneath him, cradled by the sea that had become his home. 16 years, each day both an end and a beginning, each moment holding the tension between what was and what would be. And through it all, Marshal D. Teach waited, his patience not a virtue, but a weapon, perhaps the most powerful one he possessed. For what is patience but the quiet certainty that your time will come? There are moments that divide a life into before and after. For Teach, that moment arrived on an ordinary day, beneath a sun that gave no indication of its significance. The air tasted the same, the sea stretched unchanging to the horizon, yet everything was about to transform. Thatch had found it, the yami yami no mi, the very devil fruit Teach had sought for decades. He watched from across the deck as Thatch showed it to the others, the dark fruit with its swirling patterns passing from hand to hand, its new owner unaware of its true significance, unaware that its appearance had just started a countdown. In that moment, looking at the object of his patient search held in another's casual grasp, something shifted inside Teach. A door that had remained carefully locked now opened, revealing the person he would truly become. Have you ever stood at such a threshold, where the next step would irrevocably change not just your path, but your very nature. That night, alone in his quarters, Teach sat on the edge of his bunk, massive hands clasped before him. His body was still, but his mind raced through calculations, possibilities, consequences. The decision itself had been made long ago. What remained was merely the execution. Is this how it feels? He whispered to the darkness. This clarity? Outside, the sea continued its eternal conversation with the shore. Advance and retreat, give and take. Teach listened to its rhythm, finding in it a kind of permission. Nature itself operated by laws of opportunity and necessity. It held no concept of betrayal, only survival and evolution. He thought of Edward Newgate, Whitebeard, who had given him a place, who called his crew his sons. The old captain possessed a kind of greatness Teach genuinely admired. There was honor in Whitebeard's dream, in his pursuit of family rather than treasure. But it was not Teach's dream, never had been. What does it mean to respect someone you're about to wound beyond healing, to appreciate the very bonds you intend to break? His fingers traced the dagger at his side, a simple weapon for what would be a simple act, one life exchanged for the future he had envisioned since childhood. The mathematics of ambition rarely balanced neatly, and Teach had long accepted that his ledger would never show clean accounts. A memory surfaced, Whitebeard sharing sake with him years ago, those piercing eyes seeming to look straight through his carefully constructed persona. Everyone has darkness in them, son, the captain had said. The question is whether you let it consume you or harness it for something greater. Had Whitebeard known even then? Had he seen the shadow that lived behind Teach's boisterous laugh, his seemingly simple desires? The hour grew late, the ship quieting as men sought their bunks. Soon Thatch would be alone with his prize, perhaps still marveling at his good fortune. Teach rose, his decision solidified into action. The path forward was clear now, illuminated not by light, but by the absence of it. The darkness he had always been drawn to, the darkness he would soon command. As he moved through the sleeping ship, a strange peace settled over him. Not the peace of righteousness, but of alignment, of finally bringing his outer actions into harmony with his inner truth. There was relief in that, even knowing what would follow. And isn't that the ultimate freedom? Not doing what others define as right, but becoming fully who you already are. The door to Thatch's quarters appeared before him. Teach paused, hand on the latch, allowing himself one final moment of hesitation, not out of doubt, but respect for the significance of the threshold he was about to cross. Then, silently, he stepped through. Darkness is not merely the absence of light, but a presence unto itself. This truth became viscerally clear to Teach in the days following his consumption of the Yami Yami no Mi. The power coursed through him, not like fire or electricity, but like gravity, a pulling force, hungry and endless. Now, on his own ship, with his hastily assembled crew, Teach stood alone at the bow, feeling the darkness respond to his will. It flowed from his hand like liquid night, absorbing the moonlight that tried to touch it. Strange, he murmured, watching the darkness swirl around his fingers, to finally hold what you've sought for so long. The power felt both foreign and familiar, as if it had been waiting for him, as much as he had been waiting for it. There was pain in wielding it, a constant pull that threatened to consume him if his concentration lapsed. But there was also a rightness to it that confirmed every choice he had made. Have you ever found something that felt made for you, as if the universe had crafted it with your name etched into its very essence? His new crew gave him a wide berth during these moments of practice. They feared him, as they should. They had joined him for various reasons: ambition, greed, the allure of aligning with rising power. But none of them truly understood what they had signed on to. How could they? He barely understood it himself. The darkness responded to emotions as much as to will. When anger flared, it grew denser, more volatile. When his mind cleared and focused, it became precise, almost elegant in its movements. Teach found himself practicing not just control of the darkness, but control of himself, a discipline he had never needed before. Captain, called Lafitte from behind him, his voice as unsettlingly gentle as always. The men are wondering about our next destination. Teach didn't turn immediately. Tell them patience is a virtue worth cultivating, he said, finally reabsorbing the darkness into himself. Our course is set for Drum Island. As Lafitte retreated, Teach considered his strange new first mate, the former sheriff turned pirate, with his unnerving grace and hidden cruelties. Each member of his crew represented a facet of darkness, as if the Yami Yami no Mi had drawn them together. Not just men, but symbols of what he was becoming. What if the people we gather around us are reflections not of who we are, but of who we're transforming into? Night deepened around the ship, the boundary between sea and sky disappearing until it seemed they sailed through the void itself. Teach welcomed the darkness, no longer needing light to find his way. His other senses had sharpened, or perhaps it was something beyond sense, an awareness that operated by different rules. He thought of Whitebeard and his former crewmates. By now, they would understand his betrayal in its fullness. The hunt would be on. Ace, most likely, would be dispatched to bring justice. Poetic, that fire would be sent to combat darkness. Teach found himself looking forward to the confrontation, not out of malice, but as a necessary step, a test of his new self against the old world he had left behind. The darkness within him stirred at the thought, eager for confrontation, for proof of its superiority. This hunger was new, not calculated ambition, but something more primal. The devil fruit was changing him, or perhaps merely revealing what had always lain beneath his careful masquerade. And isn't that the risk of getting what we want? That in possessing it, we discover it possesses us as well? Stars peppered the night sky, distant and cold. Teach gazed up at them, feeling simultaneously insignificant and immense, the power to pull all light into darkness. What did that make him in the grand scheme of things? Not a god, certainly. Gods created. His power was to negate, to absorb, to empty. Yet in that emptiness lay potential, the blank canvas upon which a new reality could be painted. That was what few understood about darkness. It wasn't the end, but rather the necessary void from which all beginnings emerge. As the ship cut through black waters, beneath a black sky, Marshal D. Teach spread his arms wide, embracing the night, not as his cloak, but as his kingdom. The weight of waiting had been replaced by the weight of becoming, no lighter a burden, but one he had been born to bear. For darkness, too, has its own kind of light. Dreams demand payment. This was not a new lesson for Teach, but one that deepened with each passing day. Pain radiated through him constantly now, the price of containing darkness within human form. Sometimes it woke him from sleep, his body arching as waves of agony pulsed outward from his core. Tonight was such a night. Alone in his captain's quarters, Teach sat on the edge of his bed, massive frame hunched over, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool air. The darkness inside him churned restlessly, like a living thing testing the boundaries of its cage. "Be still," he commanded, though whether to the darkness or to himself, even he couldn't say. Gradually, the pain subsided to its usual dull roar, always present but manageable. Teach rose, moving to the window to look out at the midnight sea. The moon cast a silver path across the water, a road leading to everywhere and nowhere at once. Have you ever wondered if the price you're paying for your dreams is too high? If the person you're becoming is still recognizable? as the one who first began the journey. His reflection in the glass was a stranger's, gaunt despite his size, eyes holding shadows deeper than those cast by the night. The Yami Yami no Mi was consuming him even as he wielded it. A fair exchange, perhaps. Power for life force, dreams for health, future glory for present peace. A knock at his door pulled him from these thoughts. "Enter," he called, straightening to his full height, masking any sign of weakness. Doc Q shuffled in, sickly as always, yet somehow enduring. The ship's doctor held out a small vial. "Might help with the pain, Captain," he offered, his voice raspy. "Can't cure what ails you, but it could dull the edges." Teach regarded the medicine, then shook his head. "Pain serves its purpose," he replied. "Reminds me of what's at stake." After the doctor departed, Teach returned to the window, his thoughts drifting to earlier days, when pain was simpler. A cut, a bruise, a broken bone, physical suffering that began and ended cleanly. What he experienced now was different, existing in the blurred space between body and spirit. The ship creaked around him, timber flexing against the pressure of the sea. He'd named it the Blackbeard, an assertion of his new identity. Names had power. He'd always known this. To name something was to claim it, to define its nature and purpose. He was no longer Marshal D. Teach of Whitebeard's crew, but Blackbeard, captain of his own destiny. Yet in the quietest hours, when even the sea seemed to hold its breath, he sometimes whispered his birth name to himself, like checking for a pulse, making sure that beneath the legend taking form, something human still remained. What remains of us when we shed old skins? Are we more ourselves with each transformation, or gradually becoming something unrecognizable? Outside his window, a shooting star fell, trailing silver against the black. Teach watched its descent, reminded of another night, another star, another wish made in silence. How many lights had fallen since he'd set out on this path? How many silent witnesses to his slow metamorphosis? His hand moved unconsciously to his chest, where beneath fabric and flesh, his heart still beat, ordinary in its function, extraordinary in its ambition. That muscle, no different from any other man's, somehow contained dreams vast enough to reshape the world. The paradox never ceased to fascinate him. The pain returned, sharper this time, forcing a rare grimace onto his features. No one present to witness this moment of vulnerability, this admission that even he had limits. The darkness responded to his discomfort, swirling visibly around his form like smoke from an unseen fire. "Not yet," he told it. A command, a plea, a promise. There was more to do, more to become. The darkness would have all of him eventually, but not before he claimed what he had sacrificed so much to pursue. Dawn would arrive in a few hours, bringing with it the mask he wore for his crew. Confident, indomitable, certain. But here, in this sliver of time between yesterday and tomorrow, Marshal D. Teach allowed himself to acknowledge the full weight of his choices, the accumulating cost of his ascent. And perhaps there's wisdom in such moments, in counting the price without regret, in moving forward with eyes wide open to both the glory and the loss. The darkness settled around him like a cloak as he finally returned to his bed, not to sleep, but to wait for morning, for the next step, for whatever pain and wonder the coming day would bring. What is freedom? The question haunted Teach as he stood at the ship's helm, the wind tousling his wild beard. Before him stretched the open sea, that ancient symbol of liberty. Behind him, a crew bound to his will and vision. Was this freedom, or simply a more elaborate form of constraint? Blackbeard's ship cut through morning waters, leaving Bonaro Island in its wake. The confrontation with Ace had gone as anticipated, fire against darkness, with darkness emerging victorious. The fire fist now lay in the hold, bound in sea stone and destiny, the unwitting key to Teach's next move. "Captain," called Van Auger from his perch high above. Marine ships on the horizon. Teach nodded acknowledgement, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. The pieces were moving into place. Ace's capture, the delivery to Marine headquarters, the war that would surely follow, and within that chaos, opportunity. Have you ever built a cage with your own hands, telling yourself it was actually a door? He had chosen this path freely, each step taken with full awareness, yet with each choice, the possible futures narrowed, until now he moved as if along a predetermined track. The irony wasn't lost on him, that in pursuing ultimate freedom, he had bound himself to an increasingly specific destiny. "Freedom isn't what most think it is," he murmured, hands gripping the wheel. "It's not the absence of chains, but choosing which chains to bear." The horizon line blurred, where sea met sky, that liminal space where elements confused their boundaries. Teach fixed his gaze there, finding in that uncertainty a reflection of his own state, neither fully human nor fully something else, existing in transition. Below deck, his prisoner represented another kind of transition. Ace, son of the pirate king, raised by the man who claimed to want no treasure. What chains did Fire Fist Ace wear willingly? The bonds of brotherhood, of loyalty, of a name not his by birth, but claimed through love. Were those chains heavier or lighter than ambition's weight? The marine ships grew larger on the horizon, white sails bright against the blue. Soon would come negotiation, exchange, advancement. The title of warlord waited for him. Another seeming paradox, the outlaw sanctioned by the law. Another step that was both liberation and constraint. What freedom means shifts with the tides of our lives. Perhaps it's never a state we achieve, but a direction we move toward. As preparations began for the approaching encounter, Teach withdrew to a moment of solitude, leaning against the railing and staring into the depths below. The sea was particularly clear today, revealing shapes and movements far beneath the surface, life continuing in its ancient patterns, oblivious to the machinations of men above. In that deep blue, Teach saw reflections of every version of himself, the child dreaming of adventure, the patient observer on Whitebeard's ship, the betrayer, the devil fruit user, the captain, the becoming legend, each a truth, none the complete story. Freedom, perhaps, was the space to contain all these contradictions without fracturing. His hand dipped into the water, fingers tracing patterns that the sea immediately erased. No mark remained, no evidence of his passing. Would history remember him differently? Would his name echo through ages as something more than darkness, embodied? "We leave traces, even when we can't see them," he said to the uncaring waves. "Nothing touched remains unchanged." The marine ships were close enough now that individual figures could be distinguished on their decks. Teach straightened, resuming the posture and expression expected of Blackbeard, the ambitious pirate willing to deal with the world government for advancement. The performance was not entirely false. That aspect of himself existed truly, but it wasn't the complete truth either. And that, finally, might be freedom's truest face, the space to be incomplete, contradictory, evolving, the right to contain multitudes without explanation or apology. Not the power to do anything, but the power to remain yourself amid the doing. As negotiations began across ship's railings, Marshal D. Teach played his role with practiced skill, but deep within, in spaces the darkness hadn't yet reached, something remained unchained, watching, waiting, wondering what freedom would look like when all was said and done. For perhaps that is the final irony, that freedom might be recognized only when the journey ends, and from that vantage point, we see the path we've walked with new eyes. All journeys circle back to their beginnings, though the traveler returns changed. As impelled down, faded behind his ship, Teach stood at the bow, his gaze fixed not on where he had been, but on what lay ahead. The newly recruited prisoners, souls as dark and desperate as the depths they'd been pulled from, now filled his expanded crew, their confused loyalties tied to his promise of direction. The sky above hung heavy with clouds, neither day nor night, but something in between, a twilight world suited to his current state. Teach had gained what he sought from the prison, additional powers harvested from defeated enemies, abilities that defied the known rules of devil fruits. His body hummed with these new forces, adjusting to their presence like a vessel taking on more cargo than it was designed to hold. "We're ready to sail for Marineford, Captain," Lafitte reported, his perpetual smile unchanged despite the chaos they'd left in their wake. Teach nodded, his own smile different now, heavier with knowledge, with power newly claimed, but not yet fully understood. "Then let's not keep destiny waiting. Have you ever stood at the edge of becoming, knowing that what awaits will transform you beyond recognition, that the next horizon holds not just a new place, but a new self?" The sea before them stretched out, a road of darkening blue, leading to war, to confrontation, to the next phase of his ascent. Whitebeard would be there, the man who had sheltered him for 16 years without ever truly seeing him. Or perhaps he had seen and understood and allowed Teach his deception out of some greater wisdom. The possibility haunted him more than he cared to admit. What do we owe those who shaped us, even as we outgrow their shadow? Night fell properly now, cloaking the ship in darkness that responded to his will, swirling around the masts like living smoke. The crew gave him even wider berth than before, unsettled by these new manifestations of his evolving power. Only Shiryu seemed unperturbed, the former jailer, recognizing in Teach a darkness that matched his own. "Does it hurt?" Shiryu asked, approaching with rare directness. Containing all that power? Teach considered the question, not for its answer, which was obviously yes, but for the fact it had been asked at all. "Growth always brings pain," he replied finally. "The seed splits before the plant rises." His mind turned to what awaited at Marineford, not just Whitebeard and the gathering of world powers, but the opportunity they represented, the chance to complete what he had begun so long ago, when darkness first called to him in dreams, the chance to claim a place not just in the world's present, but in its future. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then with increasing insistence. Teach remained where he stood, letting it soak him, welcoming the sensation of being simultaneously distinct from and part of the elements. Water ran through his beard, dripped from his massive frame, returned to the sea as if completing a cycle. And isn't that what we all are? Water drawn from the ocean of existence, given temporary form, eventually returning to the whole? The thought brought an unexpected peace. For all his ambition, all his calculation and patience and sacrifice, Teach recognized himself as part of something vaster than even his dreams could encompass. The darkness he commanded was ancient, existing long before him and continuing long after. He was its vessel now, its interpreter in the world of men, but not its master. Never that. "We're all just borrowing," he murmured to the night. "Even what we think we own." Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the faces of his crew, each marked in their own way by choices that had led them here. None had walked an easy path. None expected mercy from the world. In that, at least, they were united. Outcasts, recognized by other outcasts, darkness drawn to darkness. As Marineford grew closer with each passing hour, Teach felt something settling within him. Not doubt, but a crystallization of purpose. What he sought now went beyond personal power or recognition. It was about rewriting the very rules of the world, creating space for a different kind of existence than what the current order permitted. Perhaps that's the final evolution of freedom, not just choosing your own chains, but forging new possibilities for all who follow. The rain intensified, then gradually eased, leaving behind that distinctive scent of the sea refreshed. Teach breathed deeply, filling his lungs with it. Whatever came next, victory, defeat, transformation, this moment existed complete in itself. The journey and the destination briefly unified. Morning would bring Marineford, confrontation, the next step. But this night belonged to the in-between, to reflection, to the quiet acknowledgement of how far he had come from that dreaming boy on a distant shore. And as the stars emerged from parting clouds, Marshall D. Teach, Blackbeard, stood at the threshold of legend, still human enough to wonder what dreams might come when all his current ones were realized. For beyond every horizon lies another, and the journey never truly ends. It only changes course.